Honestly, the things I do for this bloody channel. There we go, almost. There we go. Hello and welcome back. Recently, a user got in contact with me about the reviews we do here on the channel and raised the important question: why in my reviews do I often not have the device up and running here on the table during the course of the reviews? Now, there are lots of factors that I'm sure we can talk about. We can talk about general framing of a video stream here. We could talk about usability and showing a device in operation. But I guess the main reason in some cases that I don't have the device on the table is this thing sounds like God having an argument with his wife or husband. It's 2026, but I'm going to get this powered down and get into the real meat and potatoes of this video, which is, should you buy the ENAS from UniFi or should you go for one of the UNAS series? Ooh, that's better, isn't it? Let's get down to comparing some NAS. It's the ruddy bloody name on the door. So, straight away, it's worth highlighting that regardless of which UniFi NAS system you go for, you are getting a turnkey NAS system. You are getting a system that doesn't necessarily have to work within an UniFi eco. So regardless of whether you've got UniFi switches and gateways and protect and all that stuff, or you don't, you can utilize these devices without all of that faff in the background if you choose, and you can run them purely offline if you choose. Alongside that, they all arrive with multi-disc RAID functionality. They all arrive with the exception of one device in the UNAS Pro 7 with U.2 NVMe slots on the rear for bolstering the storage with caching inside. They all arrive with at least one 10 gig NIC, but they do scale up accordingly depending on the scale of drives and price you're willing to pay. And on top of all of it, with the exception of the UNAS 2 and the UNAS 4, the bulk of the UniFi NAS range are in rack mount. Now, this video is focusing on the rack mount devices here. Again, I've only got the 8-bay here on the table, although I've got extensive experience with every single one of them. If you'd seen my other UNAS buyer's guide video where we had all of them here stacked up on the table, the only reason I've not disconnected all of them is it's a complete pain in the arse to do so, and they are currently running ops for a separate video there in the background. You may hear them just on the periph. But regardless, UniFi's UNAS systems there, whether you're in a UniFi Eco or not, you do have a fully featured turnkey solution here with file management, end-to-end security. You have got multi-factor authentication layered in with the UniFi services on the outset there. Alongside that, you can create shared drives. You've got a light file manager built into the web browser, but of course you can access them on Samba, SMB, alongside other services as well. But the minute you start breaking these things down, for all of their similarities, one big factor really screams at you, and that is that the UNAS series is not just lower in price than the ENAS series, it is a different world of pricing cheaper. With the 4-bay and the 7-bay UNAS series arriving at $499, and this 8-bay device arriving at $799, so just call it $800, let's go nuts. But the ENAS is $3,999. That is enormous in terms of a price differential between these two devices here. And a number of you are going to be thinking, what the hell do you get for your money? Or what are you not getting for not your money? Double negatives, always fun. The way this video is going to work, rather than compare these two against each other in terms of capability, storage and more, because to be frank, the ENAS will always work out better, it bloody well should for that price, what I'm going to do is give you 5 reasons at the outset why the ENAS may well be the NAS for you. I'm going to trump it, and I hate using that word, I'm going to trump its strengths. And then in the second half of the video, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why the UNAS series is still fantastic and why it may well be the NAS choice for you. So let's crack on with number 1 for the ENAS. It would be dead easy of me to just go, this one's got more storage space, but it's so much more than that when it comes to storage, because this is the only product currently in their lineup that supports expansions. And I know it seems weird to tout the advantage of a system being that you can buy other things with it, but hear me out. As your storage grows over time, Eventually, you're going to have to expand that storage or start changing your paths, getting secondary storage systems and more. This allows you to expand with 2 expansion chassis via 24 gig SAS connections on the rear. Now, what that means is this device can crack the petabyte scale. Way easy, and in some cases completely, rather than the UNAS series. So say for example you populated this with 30 TB drives. I know it's 2026, that would be insane, and also by the way you can get up to 44 TBs very soon. But say you fully populated this with 30 TB drives, and then you wanted a 2-disk failure in place there. That would give you around 480 terabytes storage on there. Each of the expansion systems at 16 bays each, you add them on there, and even if each device has a 2-disk failure protection on it in RAID Z2, that means you've just cracked massively the petabyte scale, and that's not even factoring in if you wanted to go for more complex clustered RAIDs in between. The fact that these can't be expanded, which is of a particular pain when you're looking at say the 4-bay 1U model, needs to be acknowledged. This is a big one for storage veterans and sysadmins in the know, but the UNAS series, its file system is BTRFS or ButterFS, FS for file system, whereas the ENAS runs on the Zettabyte file system, as the name suggests, built for scale. ZFS or ZFS, depending on which side of the pond you're living on. Now, I'm going to put some of the software on screen because although the software is the same on both of these devices at a casual glance, the feature set of the ENAS, thanks to ZFS, is significantly more intense. Notwithstanding the support of RAID Z, which can go up to triple parity disks, it also takes advantage of inline compression and inline deduplication. That means that as data is being written to the system, space-saving missions in compression, as well as deduplication, where the same data stored in multiple locations, only one copy is kept and indexing of their locations is maintained, results in file space savings on the ENAS that just aren't possible on the UNAS system. Alongside that, much faster build times thanks to the removal of the volume layer and faster rebuild and resilvering throughout the course of it. Also, alongside that on a software level, it's worth highlighting, although both of them support things like snapshots, you can get true snapshot peace of mind and immutability at a scale on the ENAS that is just not possible on the UNAS system. Finally, although both of them support things like drive encryption, encrypted storage areas, drive encryption on the ENAS is far more extensive, and thanks to ZFS, performance numbers are maintained. And finally, they have introduced iSCSI support on the ENAS, which still is not available on the UNAS, and I'm wondering if it ever will come to it now. The result being that the iSCSI support on the ENAS opens the door for far more extensive integration with third-party software, third-party storage platforms, virtualization targeting, all that kind of stuff is just available on the ENAS that will never be possible, or at least isn't possible yet, on the UNAS series. And it makes me wonder if UNAS, as I say, whether UniFi will ever grace this system with that feature set or lock it into the ENAS Enterprise NAS portfolio. Remember earlier when I mentioned that the UNAS series all arrive with 10 GB of one port at the very least? Well, the UNAS Pro has one 10 gig port, whereas the other devices have all got multiple 10 gig ports, with the UNAS Pro 8 having 3 10 gig ports that are on the rear across SFP and copper. Now, the ENAS also has 10 gig. It's only got the one 10 gig, in fact, there in copper, but that's its base port. Because alongside that, you've got two 25 gig ports on there. So a potential, depending if you can use load balancing or you can aggregate them together, maximum potential of 50 gigabit file transmission, or a bandwidth for file transmission there on the rear, and a 10 gig, for funsies. Now, it is worth bearing in mind that your RAID configurations, the drive you choose to use, how much you're going to be able to saturate that is up for debate. And of course, the number of clients you connect to it at any given time as well. There are, checks and balances. There are advantages and disadvantages to this storage array going out into 25 gig. But nonetheless, there is so much more storage sandbox built into the ENAS that is just not possible on the UNAS Pro. But again, bear in mind that the UNAS Pro 8 still arrives with those 310 gigs anyway, but we'll circle around to that again later. Hardware architecture. Now the UNAS series, all of the UNAS ones over here, the 4-bay, the 7-bay and the 8-bay, they all arrive rocking out on an ARM v8 processor alongside, again it scales for different devices, but goes from 4 gig to 16 gig of DDR4 memory, and that is soldered to the board. That is uniform, by the way, against the ENAS and that of the UNAS series there, and some people aren't too happy about that, but we'll circle around to that in the review, of course. But the CPU inside this, they're both rocking ARM processors. Now, ARM processors are designed to take command line that's being handed over to the CPU, by the way, I'm butchering this, but taking commands to the CPU and they are compressed, therefore utilising less power to execute instructions. They're loosely classed as mobile processors, but more server-grade CPUs are rocking out with this architecture that are moving them way beyond the original mobile processor labelling. Now, in the case of the ENAS, it's rocking a more modern ARM v9, a Neoverse N2 processor there. Now, that CPU is Billy bonkers, because that processor there not only is rocking Gen 5 architecture as well, opening up far more bandwidth per lane, but alongside that CPU allows for all of those heavier processors of ZFS or ZFS to be possible. But it doesn't stop there, because remember earlier I mentioned that the UNAS arrive with 4, 8 or 16 gig of fixed DDR4. This system arrives with 64 gigabytes of fixed DDR5 ECC. That's a big deal. ECC, or error correcting code, or error code correction, means that as the data is being passed through the RAM, it is checked at the beginning, at the end, thanks to a parity bit in the middle where it is checked, and if there is any write errors, any inconsistencies as it passes through, it is then repaired before it is committed to the storage. It is an industry standard for many, and it was one of the heaviest criticisms for a lot of storage veterans against the UNAS when it was launched. That is one of the things that makes up the ENAS, but I think we need to talk about the old money. I reckon a lot of you were going to assume that when it came to costs, that was always going to be an advantage to the UNAS, and spoiler alert, it will, but we'll come back to that later on. But the reason I want to talk about price in favour of the UNAS is because we need to price things up. So number one, we are looking at a 16-bay rack mount. I don't care if you're shopping Synology, QNAP, anywhere, even if you're buying a J-bod enclosure meant for like DAS or sticking in your own SAS cars, if you're looking at Sandbox, I don't care. A 16-bay rack mount minimum is $1,000 to $2,000 of anyone's money, depending on the complexity. So regardless of the CPU, the motherboard memory, any of that stuff now, you would lose about $1,000 to $2,000 just to get a 16-bay rack mount enclosure. It's the rack tax. But on top of that, we got to look at that ECC. 64 gig of DDR5 ECC in the current 2026 bonkers AI marketplace for RAM will set you back about $1,000 easy. Realistically, about $1,500. Again, factoring in your tax, factoring in getting the right UDIM, RDIM, whether it's SODIM, whether it is longer scale, just all of that, you are looking at $1,000 to $1,500 minimum there as well. Then you got to look at 25 gig. Any device, be it desktop or rack mount, rocking 25 gig ports in storage enclosure terms, because of the temperatures and the throughput and the band allocation required in the middle there, again, you're looking at about $1,000 easy on any server rocking 25 gig. You can look at mini PCs that rock out with 25 gig. You can look at 25 gig upgrade cards. If you look at just the cards on their own, you are looking at $250 to $500, with odd exceptions to the rule, like that Minis Forum one. Again, they are locked system to system. But when it comes to rack mount enclosures or any powerful system that can actually throughput 25, you are bidding $1,000 minimum. So already, without factoring in the CPU, the software, anything else, those three components bought off the shelf will make up that $399 price Anyway, I'm not saying $399 is cheap. I'm not insane. I'm drinking Greg's coffee, for God's sake. But I will say that at $399 for this, when you factor in those three components, the pricing makes more sense. This is turning into a real love fest for the ENAS, isn't it? Let's shove you over there a second, because now it's time for the UNAS to take the limelight. And ultimately, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why the UNAS series may well be the one that deserves your money and your data. Rather than singling out any one unit in the UNAS Pro series, I'm going to just say quickly that all of them are definitely going to have less of an impact on the old power consumption than that ENAS. All of that big monster hardware architecture and all that guff that I said earlier on, that is going to take its toll at the plug in your wall and your lecky bill. And depending where you are in the world right now, those lecky bills are going up, 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 up. And the UNAS Pro series, they are still rack mounts, so you're still going to have a higher power consumption than, you know, your average Billy Basic desktop model. But the rack mount devices here are going to consume less power in ops than this device here. And that also goes into the case, for example, if you've got 2 of these devices, 2 of the 8 bays, rather than the 1 16 bay there. There's actual kind of parity there. Again, your mileage will vary depending on the hard drive you choose to use, but just the general CPU RAM architecture of these, and just the general system overhead is just lower, like for like in deployment versus deployment scenarios here on the UNAS rather than the ENAS. Come on, we got to talk about it, that price point there. I'm still going to stand by everything I said, that $399 for this device does make sense once you factor in the hardware, and also this kind of hardware at scale versus your Synologies, your QNAPs or whatever in the market makes a lot of sense. They are entering an enterprise field with a, in terms of enterprise, very attractive price. But come on, we got to keep our feet on the ground. This 8 bay here, we're going to focus specifically on the 8. If this is $799, do you know what, let's call it $800. I'll chuck you in a buck. If this is $800, that means for the price of this, you could buy 5 of these. You could have 40 bays of storage. You could have 5 of them racked up, 2 of them on another site. You could have linked network backups. You could have an enormous amount of storage at your disposal. And when we were doing our deep testing of the ENAS there, it is worth highlighting, and I've chatted to the brand about this, that they have gone for the clustered RAID approach because ZFS just works better at a certain number of drive levels once they are RAIDed together. And I had back and forth with them about this because I do think there are advantages to having 16 bays in a single, say, RAID 6 environment rather than having 2 RAID configurations in one pool, because that's how they want this to be run. And I get that, but if you're running 2 RAID 6s because you want to enjoy 2 disk failure, there's a whole back and forth that I've had with them about this. But if you were to move to this system, yes, you're going to have separate power and separate network connections between them, and you can't expand, of course, but having 5 of these devices for the price of this one, I can see a lot of brands looking at $4,000 and going, do you know what? That sounds bloody appealing. And also, realistically, some of that money might be quite good to stick on the old storage. I alluded to this point earlier on. I am really pleased at just how pie in the sky this brand has aimed for its network connectivity on the ENAS, and it has to be applauded, especially once you factor in multi-user client access at once and you factor in SATA SSDs as well. But nevertheless, 2 times 25 gigs on this, I don't know a scenario where this could fully saturate that. You could tweak the blocks. You could use the most optimized SATA SSDs in this. I just don't think this is ever going to saturate 50 gigabit networks. Yes, you could have it as a failover for separate networks. There's loads of advantages to that, but just simply on the paper, it's a very specific kind of environment that you're ever even going to hope to fully saturate the connections, let alone the extra 10 gig. Now, on the UNAS series side of things, yes, this has got 3 10 gig NICs, which with 8, I think, again, to fully saturate, all 3 of those, it's going to be tough. But nonetheless, there is a better parity between the network connections once you scale down the portfolio of filling the network saturation point versus the drive overall performance number, and therefore there is an argument to be made that the money you are paying for the 25 gig network connectivity on this, if you don't think you are in an operational environment where you're going to take advantage of that, you may be well better suited to get one or more of the UNAS series for your money, because these have a better balancing act. Yes, again, the UNAS Pro series, particularly the 1U 4-bay, by the way, which has a whole bunch of network connectivity that I don't think that 4-bay could ever hope to saturate, but still, at least you're not paying for bandwidth, which, depending on your mileage and deployment scenario, you may never use anyway. This one may seem blisteringly obvious, but you'll be amazed how many people try to scale up for the future that they may never need. And I want to talk about physical size, because not only is the UNAS Pro series available in that 1U and 2U scales there, so in your rack mount environment, you're going to take up very lesser space in your rack and have to factor in temps and cooling and airflow. But this 4U here is also extraordinarily deep. It is almost the deepest rack I've had here in the studio, although I have had slightly longer ones. Again, you can come up with your own joke in the comments. Whereas the UNAS Pros arrive, particularly the UNAS Pro Original, that 7-bay, is very shallow. They go as low as 30 to 40 centimetres. And although the 8-bay is a fraction deeper than those, it has to be said that depth-wise and physical space-wise, some of the UNAS environments don't even need to go in a rack cabinet. Some of them can be deployed on a neat little shelf up top. That is just not an option on this device, with its enormous amount of cooling, to say the very least, let alone its physical height and depth. This next point is for people that are already in the UniFi ecosystem, and also, frankly, it's going to sound slightly counterintuitive to things I've said on the channel previously, but I have to acknowledge that my experience is not reflective of everyone, and that is the power backup from UniFi. Now, if you go for the ENAS system, this arrives with redundant power supplies that you can remove. Now, indeed, the UNAS system here has exactly the same thing, although slightly smaller PSUs. But I will say that if you look at the 4-bay and you look at the UNAS Pro Original, they take advantage of that power backup module. So what they have on the rear there is a separate port that you can run into the UniFi backup module, which sits in a rack mount, providing a redundant power supply to multiple devices there. Again, it's not the same as a UPS, but it's at least providing a standalone redundant power supply to multiple devices. And if you're already in the UniFi Eco, there is every possibility that you've got switches or gateways in your environment that don't have multiple power supplies, so you bought the power backup to support those devices. And you may have ports free, but ultimately it allows you, in the case of the UNAS Pro 7 and the UNAS Pro 4, to add that to that existing arrangement and, be better for you, I guess. Now, again, that is not a compliment I can give to the UNAS Pro 8, but at least it still has redundant power suppliers. And if you are someone that has a very compact rack mount arrangement, notwithstanding the height and depth points I mentioned, if you already have the power backup in place, you may find that arrangement in the UNAS Pro 7 and 4 appealing to you. It's not for me, but I know there are users that take advantage of that. But that's really it. The ENAS and the UNAS series are both good NAS systems in their own right. And it's kind of surprising when you think about it that although UniFi has been in the network market for what feels like 1 billion years at this point, they haven't even been in the NAS world publicly for 2 years. I think it's like 1 year and 8 months or something at this point, launching their first device in November 2024. The point I'm making is they've made enormous strides to already have this second profile in their NAS portfolio there. Now, again, I think the salient point we have to take from this is power versus flexibility. Flexibility in price, power in ZFS. Power and bandwidth and ECC potential versus smaller footprint, flexibility and ease of deployment. And that should be the big takeaway. Now, if you have found this video helpful. Do me and Ed a solid here at NAS Compares. It's just us doing this. It's a tough enough gig. YouTube's getting harder, and NAS is a niche subject, man. So if you want to support us and you found this video helpful, link below are links to UniFi's own store to get hold of these devices at the prices that I've discussed. If you use those links, we get a small commission on every single sale. It allows us to keep doing what we do, and it's a passive way for you to support us and other creators if you use their affiliated links. But it's really up to you. Don't do it unless you found the video helpful and you want to support what we do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.